It's week 2 of the federal case, the U.S. government versus Sean P. Diddy Combs, and there are a lot of secrets, broken friendships, freak-offs, and more that we have to uncover this week. This week started with Dawn Richard taking the stand, and she's going to testify about the abuse that she saw Diddy give Cassie, but also she's talking about an incident that happened whereby a skillet and eggs were involved. Just listen to the episode for the rest. Cassie's former best friend, Carrie Morgan, will also take the stand and testify that her and Cassie were best friends for about 17 years. In 2018 is when their friendship ended, and it's all because Diddy assaulted Carrie. However, it didn't end there. Cassie sealed the deal or put the nail in the coffin with something else, and this is what Carrie said ultimately ended their relationship. Then there were his assistants. 2 of his assistants testified this week, and they went all the way from being subjected to lie detector tests when things would go missing to having to set up and break down freak-offs just for Diddy. Also picking up sometimes his medication or drugs. Also on the witness list this week was one of their former freak-off escorts, a guy by the name of The Punisher. So the name says enough. We also heard from another unsuspected witness, Cassie's mom. Cassie's mom told us a lot about the turmoil that happened between Cassie and Diddy. Not only that, but at one point in time where Diddy told Cassie's mother that she owed him $20,000 and that she had to pay Bad Boy $20,000. Finally, this week's star witness by far was Kid Cudi. We heard a lot about Kid Cudi and Cassie's past relationship in last week's episode. They dated briefly in 2011, and we know that Diddy was super jealous of this relationship. Cudi would speak to the abuse that he heard about Cassie and Diddy from Cassie. Also, he told us a little bit about a blown up car as well as a break-in at his home that happened during the time that he was dating Cassie. We're truly peeling back the layers to one of the biggest scandals in hip hop history. The testimonies and the stories are coming in super fast, but we got you covered at the point of no return. So tune in to this compilation episode by me, Amanda Washington, one of your co-hosts, as we go through week 2 of the Diddy trial. Here's everything you need to know about week 2, day 1 of the Diddy trial. I'm going to open up with a quote. Y'all know how I do. He came up behind me and choked me, then boomeranged a wooden hanger at my head. This is a quote from Carrie Morgan. Carrie Morgan is Cassie's ex-best friend of 17 years. I know that we left off at Dawn Richard from last week, but to be honest, that's not where the tea is, in my opinion. So we're going to start with Carrie, and then we'll circle back to Dawn in a second. So Carrie was witness number 2 of the day, and she took the stand, and she had a lot to say about her and Cassie's relationship. She said that her and Cassie's relationship started in 2001 and ended in 2018. They met as teenagers because they were both models, and then they ended up moving to Manhattan together later on. And once Cassie started singing and she actually recorded Me and You, then she met Diddy, and she would also testify that for the first time in 2007 is when she found out that Diddy and Cassie were in fact an item and that they were dating. Cassie and Carrie again stopped being friends in 2018 because Diddy assaulted her. But it wasn't as simple as Diddy just assaulting her and then the two just parting ways. Here's a direct quote from her. She says, and when she says she means Cassie, she did not support me after Sean assaulted me. I draw the line at assault. So Diddy would assault Carrie inside of Cassie's apartment. After this particular assault, when he comes up behind her, she said that she had marks on her neck, a concussion, and she also began vomiting uncontrollably. At the time, she said she wanted to press charges, but she never actually went through with pressing charges. However, Cassie contacted her about a month after the incident and said, hey, here's $30,000 in an NDA. She testified that she continuously told Cassie to leave Diddy. However, Cassie told her that she was not able to leave Diddy because he controlled everything, from her finances down to her career. Here was another crazy direct quote from Carrie. She said, I don't think she cared if he came in and killed her. If you guys recall from last week, there was also a friend present with Cassie after the Intercontinental LA hotel incident, and that friend was Carrie. Carrie will testify that Diddy showed up to Cassie's door, banging on the door with a hammer for a very, very long time. She also testified that when Cassie showed up to her apartment, because Carrie was in town to support Cassie for her movie premiere, that she showed up with a black eye. Here are some other things that Carrie also witnessed while she was still friends with Cassie and Cassie was dating Diddy. She said that there were multiple times where Diddy would call Cassie or Carrie just to get in contact with Cassie, upwards towards 50 times in a row. He also yelled at Cassie constantly. During this time, she also mentioned that Cassie had very high self-esteem out the window when she met Diddy. She also said that when they first became friends, Cassie wasn't much of a drinker or a drug abuser, but of course, once they met Diddy, the two used a lot of drugs, including Molly, ecstasy, weed, and things of that nature. She also recalled a few times where she saw Diddy physically abusing Cassie, including one time where she saw Diddy physically drag Cassie by her hair for about 10 feet. She was very clear on the stand that she didn't even want to testify, but that she was subpoenaed and she had to show up. Here was another quote. She said, "I don't want to be here. I moved on with my life." One thing she did also make clear was that during the time of their friendship, Cassie began to talk to Michael B. Jordan, and that Diddy was very jealous about this, but also that Cassie was jealous of Diddy's relationship with Gina, somebody who he was having a relationship ongoing with while he was dating Cassie, as well as the relationship that he had with Kim Porter. As we know, Kim Porter is the mother of 4 of his children. Okay, moving back to Dawn Richard. So a little bit about Dawn. What we talked about with her today was just a refresher. She said that Diddy frequently would abuse Cassie in front of them. And so she saw this from about 2009 to 2011. Here's a direct quote. She said, "He would punch her, choke her, drag her, slap her in the mouth. I saw him kick her and punch her in the stomach." She also recounted a time where she saw P. Diddy actually punch Cassie in the stomach with a closed fist while they were in Central Park. Another time they were in a restaurant in LA, and he also hit her again in front of a group of people, and this was in front of people from Bad Boy. She also testified that she continuously told Cassie to leave Diddy. However, once Diddy got word of this, he would then start to threaten her and say, "You need to stay out of this." He also told her, "You're here to work, and if you don't stop, you'll pay for it." So here's a direct quote from Dawn. She said, "I made the decision that it would be best for my safety and myself to not interfere because I don't think that I was ready to do anything." Of course, we heard about this 2009 skillet incident, right? Where Diddy was pissed and allegedly he threw a skillet or something in a skillet at Cassie. So this part was a little shaky in court today because the defense tried the best that they could to pick apart what Dawn said to make it seem like her word has changed over time between either Diddy throwing the skillet at Cassie or throwing the eggs that were inside of the skillet at Cassie, saying that her story has changed consistently over time. She also testified that Diddy continuously wanted to control Cassie with this quote, using phrases like, "I own you." She also made mention that she also saw Diddy with firearms, as well as his security and other people with firearms in their possession as well. Interestingly enough, though, she says she never saw him take opioids. Maybe weed, but she never saw him do any hard stuff like opioids. So another point of Diddy's defense trying to catch Dawn up today was when they tried to talk to her about her failed, or what they would say is her failed career. So they said that basically she was out to get Diddy. They asked her, "Would you say that Diddy sabotaged your career?" And she would say yes. Okay, and for the final witness for the day, we have David James. David James was a former assistant of Diddy's. He said that he worked with Diddy every single day. Here's a direct quote. He said his job function was to make sure that Combs was able to operate as a chairman of a company and to get every environment comfortable. He said sometimes he would work 3 days straight with no nights off. He said he would coordinate things like Diddy's schedule, his chef, all kinds of aspects of Diddy's life before he even woke up. During his HR interview, interestingly enough, this is what HR told him. They said, "This is Mr. Combs' kingdom. We're all here to serve in it." Also, when he started to get suspicious about things that were going on around in Bad Boy and with Diddy, this is what Diddy security told him. They said, "Stay in your lane. Stay in your lane." So it seems like this was a lot of people just kind of minding their own business, even though they knew that what Diddy was doing was completely wrong. Here's another quote. He asked Cassie, he said that he had a few conversations with Cassie, and asked Cassie, "Why don't you leave?" Cassie said, "He controls my career, pays my allowance, and pays my rent." So Cassie confessed to him that she actually had an allowance that Diddy gave her. While on the stand today, he actually broke down in tears. So he said that while they had a trip on the way to LA, he heard Diddy talk to a friend about Cassie, and he actually described Cassie as his queen and also somebody that was very moldable. So that was the end of his testimony. They will bring him back tomorrow for more testimony. And here's what we can look forward to tomorrow in terms of court. Tomorrow, we will be hearing from Regina Ventura, who is Cassie's mother, and then we will also be hearing from another male escort, as well as Sean Combs' former personal chef. So we have a few other people, but one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is the thing that they keep driving home is the fact that sex trafficking happened. They're making it very clear that there is coercion, that it was forced, and that he was having sex any and everywhere with women that did not want to have sex with him. So leave me some comments. Tell me what you guys think about today. I know today definitely wasn't as heavy as the past days, but I think for me, the one that stuck out the most today was definitely hearing from her ex-best friend of 17 years. I couldn't imagine being friends with somebody for that long and then not being able to be friends with them anymore because of my ex. So tell me what y'all think. Diddy once took an ecstasy pill that was shaped like former President Barack Obama's head, according to David James, his former assistant from 2007 to 2009. Y'all already know by now, I'm Amanda from The Point of No Return, the True Crime Podcast, and we are covering the Diddy trial. This is Diddy trial week 2, day 2. Ain't that a... So we started day 2 again with the testimony of David James. We left off yesterday with David James, who is Diddy's former assistant yet again, and he's talking about drug use that he saw in Diddy's camp. He said oftentimes he sometimes even got drugs for Diddy and his friends. He did testify he never saw Diddy get physically violent with Cassie. He was Diddy's assistant very early on in Diddy and Cassie's relationship. He testified he was tasked with doing things like stocking hotel rooms and buying different kinds of supplies for Diddy. So he would also organize these rooms, buying personal items like condoms, baby oil, Astroglide. Astroglide we know was something that we found or that we saw in Diddy's raid of his hotel room at the Park Hyatt in New York City. He was also instructed to not submit these items for reimbursement because they did not want these items on record. He also admitted that he was subjected to a few lie detector tests and some shakedowns because Diddy's things would go missing from time to time, like a Cartier bracelet and some other of his prized possessions. And he said this was a little intimidating. Okay, so one thing that we didn't touch last week because I wanted it to kind of play out more, but I will say now, was Cassie talked a bit about Suge Knight, and she said that during a freak off in particular, that Diddy security came in and stopped the freak off because there was a sighting of Suge Knight somewhere nearby. However, there's more about the Suge Knight sighting that I'm going to tell you that the personal assistant told us about. So David testified that for the first time working for Diddy, he felt like his life was in danger when they saw Suge Knight. He said that him and Diddy security went to go get food for Diddy and the team from a local diner, and at that diner, they saw Suge Knight. They approached Suge, and then they went back to Diddy's house to tell Diddy about it. Diddy then got guns, as well as some people on his security team. They went back to the diner. By the time they got back to the diner, Suge was gone. However, Diddy was in the back seat of the car with 3 guns on his lap. David testified soon thereafter this incident, he did leave Diddy's team. He said in May 2009, he was done. This was too much. Our next witness of the day was Regina Ventura, and this is Cassie's mom. Cassie's mom testified that her and Cassie saw each other pretty frequently upon Cassie kind of getting famous and Diddy and Cassie first dating in 2006. She said she met him for the first time. She testified once Cassie moved to LA with Diddy, she only saw her once or twice a year, and this was really around holidays. And Regina also testified that Cassie emailed her and another one of P. Diddy's employees about the threat of him releasing a sex tape of her. So here is a direct quote from her. She said, "I did not understand a lot of it. The sex tapes threw me. I did not know the other person, but knew that he was going to try to hurt my daughter." So she was kind of confused and thrown off, but she knew that he was out to get Cassie. Around the same time as the sex tape threat, Diddy also reached out to Regina and said that she owed him $20,000 for the money that was wasted on Cassie and her career. He labeled this as recoup money. He went so far as to put Regina in contact with a bad boy bookkeeper. Regina testified her and her husband didn't have that kind of money. They had to take out a home equity loan to get this kind of cash, and they ended up wiring bad boy the $20,000. And then in about 5 days later, they got that same $20,000 back from Diddy. This recoup money incident also happened around the same time that Diddy was out for Kid Cudi, and that Kid Cudi was dating Cassie. Cassie also testified last week that in December of 2011, her mother took pictures after Diddy had beat her up really, really badly. And this was during like a Christmas visit when she went home. This was also during the time when she dated Kid Cudi. Her mom actually testified in court and showed those pictures today in court. Sheree Hayes was our next witness, and y'all, this is going to blow you away because it blew me away, okay? Sheree Hayes was a male escort that they interviewed today on the stand. Sheree said that he met Diddy and Cassie around 2012. He got his first call from Cassie. She was using an alias, but Cassie said that she wanted him to do some work for her and her husband. When he arrived, this is what she told him. This is a direct quote. Her and her husband liked to create a sexy scene. So the sexy scene involved these things that we've heard of involving freak-offs, the application of baby oil, and that her husband would eventually come out to watch. That is something that he testified today in court. He also said that he currently works as a partner with an exotic dance company called Hunkamania. Okay? Hunkamania. And his go-to name or his alias, Sheree's alias, is the Punisher. I'm gonna drop a photo. So he would also testify that during this encounter, the husband would give subtle kind of hints and interactions, and he would say like, hey, do this, do that, do this, do that. So he was kind of directing the whole exchange. Before the first encounter, he said that he got $800, and after the encounter was done, he received an additional $1,200. Testified that he didn't know that it was Diddy at first, but he did say this. He said that he sat at a table naked except for a veil like a Muslim woman would wear. That was what he testified in court. He said he was instructed to have no communication at all with the man that was sitting at the table. He also testified they probably had anywhere between 8 to 12 interactions. He eventually found out who Diddy was by seeing his name on a TV at one of the hotels. He said that the rooms were always dimly lit with electric candles, the sheets were always covering furniture, and that they would always set the scene. So they might be started sitting on the couch. They would create a look by rubbing each other with baby oil, and then they would start off with oral, and then they would move on possibly to some kind of other type of pin. Okay. And then they would go on from there. Another quote that he testified was, he said, oftentimes Diddy would throw protection at them. And a quote was, I'm ready to see them F. He also testified he never felt that Diddy was intoxicated during any of these incidents. And he also felt that Cassie was not uncomfortable during any of these incidents. However, he did say that sometimes she winced inside at Diddy's instructions during freak-offs. So it's kind of like, you said she feels comfortable and you never got a weird feeling, but she winced inside. So which one is it? He also testified that after 2016, when he failed to perform, he was never asked to come back. Which leads me to a very interesting point. Y'all know I'm a journalist at heart, and I see a lot of y'all saying you're a good storyteller. That's because I actually am a journalist, y'all. So the funny thing about this is, or the interesting thing, should I say, about this is, he actually is an author of a book about men who have ED. And so the book is called What's Harder Than Freezer Meat? Feel free to go to his Instagram. I'm also going to leave his Instagram for y'all so y'all can see it, because he has a book all about it. His book all about it. In this book, he said that he also uses false names, but he describes his interactions with Diddy and Cassie in the book. Then they wrap up the day with Gerard Gannon, who is a Homeland Security officer. Special Agent Gannon was the boots on the ground when they raided Diddy's house in Miami back in March of 2024. He testified that between about 80 and 90 law enforcement officers were present the day that they raided Diddy's home in Miami. These officers were also in boats and on the water just in case anyone tried to escape via the water. However, he said that it took place around 2 or 3 p.m. because they waited until Diddy left his home because they wanted him to be gone. They knew that he was leaving the country for vacation with his family. He also testified about some things that they found in the home. Here are some things: platform high heels, sex toys, baby oil, personal lubricant, lingerie in the closet. They also found upper and lower receivers of AR-15s, which are parts of a weapon. That is something that he testified, okay? So he also showed these parts of a weapon, and they were kind of tied up in a strategic way while they were in court today so they wouldn't go off. But these are things that he actually showed today in court. So it got cracking in there. He's going to be back tomorrow to testify a little bit more. It's also said that Kid Cudi is supposed to be testifying this week too. So the case is starting to ramp up. But like a lot of you are wondering, the prosecution really has to make sure that they fully package all of count 1 this week, which is the sex trafficking count. So what are you thinking about what happened in day 2 so far? Where are we at? Talk to me in the comments. Let me know what y'all are thinking. But until next time, I'm Amanda from The Point of No Return. If you haven't already listened to our week 1 recap, it streams anywhere that you get podcasts. So please tap in with us. Leave us comments, like, subscribe, send to your friends, and we'll be back. 25 bottles of baby oil and 31 bottles of lubricant were found in Diddy's closet when his house was raided last year. I'm Amanda from the Point of No Return, a true crime podcast, and we are covering the Diddy trial week 2, day 3, aka day 8 of his trial. Today started off with a continuation of Homeland Security Officer Gerard Gannon's testimony, where he's talking about how they raided Diddy's Miami home last year in 2024 and exactly all the crazy stuff that they found in there. Just to jog your memory really quickly, he said they found upper and lower receivers of AR-15s inside of the house. He also testified in court today that they found a lot of other crazy stuff in that closet. Y'all know I'm gonna drop a pic so y'all can see. So he said that they found a pair of red high-heeled shoes. They also found 18 pairs of platform high heels and 3 cell phones that were hidden inside of a boot. Of course, we already heard about some of the freak-off essentials with baby oil and lubricant, but there were also other materials found. Investigators also found a lot of recreational DRUGS's, and they were in a Gucci bag. This contained an assortment of pills, white powder, and crystal rock-like substances. This is what he testified in court today. These things would end up testifying positive for ketamine, which we know was a drug of choice, per what Cassie testified last week, as well as coke. They also recovered traces of MDMA as well as bullets. The next witness was Dawn Hughes. Dawn Hughes is a psychologist. Interestingly enough, this is a famous psychologist in terms of these types of cases. So hear me out. Dawn Hughes is a board-certified clinical and forensic psychologist that testified as a blind expert. So when I say blind expert, that means that she went into this case saying that she didn't know much about it. She also had never assessed any victims or witnesses that were involved in this case. She also testified in the defamation trial in 2022 with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, and also testified in R. Kelly's case as well. If you guys know anything about R. Kelly's case, his case in terms of charges, some of them were similar to Diddy's charges as well. Interesting fact that the defense did bring up during cross-examination was the fact that Dr. Hughes is definitely paid by the prosecution, a pretty hefty amount actually, about $6,000 a day just to be there and testify. So enough about her money, here is more about her testimony. She testified that it's pretty common for victims to stay in abusive relationships because they feel trapped. She said in particular, when it comes to sex type of abuse, it's a private kind of abuse because it feels harmful and they're ashamed. They feel like they can't tell anybody. Because they can't tell anybody, it makes it very difficult for them to want to leave the relationship or to tell people about the abuse. Here's a direct quote. They experience a tremendous amount of shame, humiliation, and degradation. She also testified that victims also use substances a lot of times because they want to feel numb. So we know that this is something that we actually heard from Cassie last week. Hence, she said that she used K or ketamine a lot because she wanted to feel numb during freak-offs with Diddy. She also brought up trauma bonds. So I know that we often talk about trauma bonds and relationships. She said that trauma bonds make it really hard or unwilling for partners to actually want to leave a relationship. So when I looked up the definition of a trauma bond, it said this. It says where a victim can be attached to an abusive partner sometimes and will try to chase nice moments even in spite of the violence. So even though there is, crazy stuff going on around them, they still want to attach themselves to those nice moments, so they stick around because they're trauma bonded. She also explained that resources are necessary for a victim to need to leave an abusive relationship, and oftentimes the abuser is in control of the resources. We heard this a lot in the last week with Cassie's case because Diddy was in control of her money, her livelihood, all of these things. It made it extremely hard for her to leave him. Here's a quote. Many victims will wait months, even years before telling about what happened to them. Abuse victims often use minimizing and hedging language when discussing the abuse. So she also said that it might take them a while just to discuss what happened to them. Sort of like Cassie, she's finally now saying something, but it took her a while to finally come out and really confess and say what happened to her. The last testimony of the day was George Kaplan, who was a former assistant of Diddy's. George Kaplan, who is now 34, worked for Diddy from about 2014 to 2015. At the time, that means he was 24 or 25. He was making $125,000 a year. I too, at that time, was around the same age. Well, I'm aging myself a little bit. I was about 2 to 3 years younger, but I couldn't imagine making $125,000 at the age of 24. When I'm telling you I would have been blowing it. Anyhow, this isn't about me. This is about George. So George would actually invoke his Fifth Amendment right today because he said he didn't want to self-incriminate. However, the prosecution gave him an immunity agreement. They said that this doesn't cover perjury though. So he had to get up there and he had to tell the truth, but they did offer him an immunity agreement and he went to testify. So last week we heard about one of Diddy's assistants quitting after he experienced Cassie and Diddy getting into an altercation and Diddy abusing Cassie. This would be the assistant that actually resigned after he experienced that in 2015. So here's a little bit about the day in the life of an assistant that works for Diddy. George testified that he worked about 80 to 100 hours a week. That's literally double what the average person works a week, okay? He communicated daily with Diddy, exchanging phone calls, text messages, any type of communication where they were in constant contact with Diddy, asking for little things here and there. These things can include clothing, food, anything that Diddy needed. He also testified that Diddy would actually threaten his job monthly, and that sometimes his tone was angry and then sometimes his tone was motivational, saying that he only had the best of the best working for him and around him. When Diddy would travel to locations, he would have George either fly ahead of him on his jet or in a commercial aircraft. And when he would get there, he would have George to set up his room for him. So what does that look like, you might add? George had his very own, what I would call a freak off bag. So in this bag were clothes, a speaker, candles, liquor, baby oil, and lubricant in it. So he would do all of this stuff and he would set up the room and get it right just for Diddy to get there. It was to his understanding that in these hotel rooms, Diddy was meeting up with a female partner. And if that wasn't enough, not only did he set up the room, he also broke the room down. So after Diddy would leave from said freak-offs, George would then go back after Diddy and pack up his stuff and also clean up the room. He testified that there would typically be liquor bottles all over the place, baby oil and baby oil bottles, as well as sports drinks. He said that he went to clean up behind Diddy also because he was in fear that there was a potential that the tabloids or somebody else could get a hold of how these rooms were left in the condition that they looked in, because they just looked that crazy when Diddy was done with them, and he didn't want these photos to be sold to the tabloids. He also said that Diddy's medicine bag included some of the following: Advil, Tylenol, and of course, ketamine. He also testified about picking up MDMA for Diddy at one point in time in Miami, and once in Los Angeles, another substance that he was unsure about. George will continue his testimony tomorrow in court during day 9. Day 9, we are also set to see Kid Cudi and 4 other witnesses. Who they are, I'm not sure yet. So far with the prosecution and these witnesses, they are trying their best to establish some kind of criminal enterprise or network that Diddy has been using in order to pull off these freak-offs. And in order for Diddy to be charged with the RICO, they're going to have to prove that he, in fact, was running a criminal enterprise with the people that were around him. Another person's name who we saw come up today, again, was Christina Karam, his right-hand man or his chief of staff, as a lot of people have already talked about time and time again. So there's a lot more witnesses to come, a lot more information that we're still unpacking. So stick with us. If you guys have any questions about anything or anything I can answer, please leave them down in the comments. And again, if you want to recap from week 1, please listen to the Point of No Return True Crime podcast, Courtroom Clarity, the Diddy trial week 1, now streaming wherever you listen or watch your podcast. Until tomorrow, I'm Amanda, and I will catch you later. Diddy's defense attorney, Brian Steele, insinuated today in court that Cassie was playing both Kid Cudi and Diddy at the same time and was leading a double life by dating the both of them back in 2011. Here's a quote. "The person who played you and the person who played Sean was Miss Ventura. True?" Kid Cudi then said, "True." I'm Amanda from the Point of No Return, a true crime podcast, and we're covering the Diddy trial, day 9. Yesterday, we left off with George Kaplan, who was Diddy's former assistant. I'm going to come back to George. I'm going to give you the goods first with Kid Cudi. We're just going to go straight into his testimony. We already discussed last week, Kid Cudi and Cassie dated in 2011 very briefly. Cudi would testify that he knew Cassie and Diddy had some problems per what she told Cudi. However, he did not think that they were still together when her and Cudi got together. So here's a timeline. This timeline starts in December 2011. In December 2011, Kid Cudi said he got a call from Cassie early in the morning and she sounded very frantic and scared. The call was about the fact that they were dating and that Diddy found out about them. The call did confuse him a little bit because he was like, why does it matter? Ain't y'all broke up? But he also testified that she sounded very stressed, so he went and picked her up. Cuddy then testified after he picked up Cassie, they went to a nearby hotel and they spoke on the phone with one of Diddy's associates, somebody by the name of Capricorn Clark. Cuddy testified that Capricorn sounded very scared and that she was on the verge of tears during this conversation. He also told us today that Capricorn was forced into the car by Diddy. Capricorn also told them that at that current time, she was sitting outside of Cuddy's house waiting for Diddy to come back out and that him and an associate were inside of Cuddy's home doing God knows what. So what does Cuddy do? He decides he's leaving the hotel. He's going to his house. When Kid Cudi asked Diddy, was he in his house? All Diddy said was, I just want to talk to you. Cuddy then responded and said, I'm on my way right now. By the time Cuddy got home, he did say the outside of his home looked pretty normal. However, he did notice that his cameras had been moved. Inside his house, he noticed that some of the gifts that he bought his family for Christmas were open and they were on top of his counter. And he also noticed that his dog was locked inside of a bathroom. Kid Cudi also said by the time he made it back home, Diddy was still asking where he was and they were going to link up. But then eventually Cudi came to his senses and he said, I actually don't know who this man is with. I'm kind of solo, so I'm going to call the police. He then filed a police report that day about the apparent break-in. So time moves forward that month. Cudi goes to Connecticut with Cassie to celebrate the holidays with her and her family. Here's another direct quote. I guess he was in the dark about things and he wanted to talk. But at that point post break-in, I didn't want to talk. When he was saying this because Diddy was texting him during that trip, trying to get in contact with him. He also says, you broke into my house, you messed with my dog, and I don't want to talk to you. So as we know, per Cassie's testimony last week, there were threats of Cudi's car getting blown up prior to it actually happening. So in January 2012, Cudi would get a call from his dog walker to say that his Porsche was on fire. He would testify in court when seeing a photo of his Porsche that the damage of the Molotov cocktail did this to my Porsche. So when you see the picture, you can see there's a hole in the top, the doors are burned. And if you guys don't know what a Molotov cocktail is, you can look it up. It's basically a bottle with some kind of like cloth that people light on fire with like lighter fluid or whatever, and then they throw it into whatever object they want to. So people do it in burn buildings, cars, whatever. But Molotov cocktail. There you go. It looks like the top of my Porsche was cut open and there was a Molotov cocktail put in it. Soon thereafter this, he reached out to Diddy because he said enough was enough. This needs to end. So he meets up with Diddy, and here's a quote. He says, Sean Combs was standing there staring out of the window with his hands behind his back like a Marvel supervillain. During this time when they met up, he said they also talked about Cassie and Cudi's relationship. During cross-examination, it came out that DNA was taken from the crime scene of the Porsche. And at this time, in my opinion, this is when his defense was able to cast a little doubt on if Diddy was the person who threw the Molotov cocktail or not, because they said they found DNA, but the DNA that they found actually was a woman's DNA. And as we know, Diddy is a man. That's number one. Number two, no one ever got arrested for this incident. No one ever saw anything. No one ever came forward to say anything. So it kind of casts a little doubt on it, right? One of Diddy's charges is also arson. He also testified during cross-examination that after about a year, the way that Cassie and Kid Cudi's relationship ended was they just kind of stopped talking. So here's what Brian Steele says. He says, she played you, right? Cudi replies and says, yes. He then says, I was upset to find out that she kind of went back to him. During the meeting when the three met up, Cassie explained that her and Diddy just kind of fell back in love, and that's how it happened. When Cudi asked Diddy about his car, he said that Diddy's response was, I don't know what you're talking about. And this is similar to what we heard last week when Cassie said his response was, what Porsche? A few years later, Cudi and Diddy would run into each other at Soho House in West Hollywood. At this point in time, here's what Cudi said that Diddy said to him. Man, I just want to apologize for everything and all that bullshit. That is what he said to Kid Cudi back in 2015. What he's apologizing for, I'm not sure. Is he taking responsibility, y'all, for burning up that Porsche? Cudi said that after the apology, he found peace with the situation and he washed his hands of it. Cudi also confirmed that Cassie had told him about the physical abuse that she endured at the hands of Diddy. However, never any sexual abuse. Finally, Kid Cudi said that him and Cassie broke up in 2011, and they broke up because the relationship was just too dangerous for the both of them. Diddy and Cassie's former makeup artist, Mila Morales, also testified. Mila worked with Diddy from 2000 to 2005, and then she worked with Cassie and Bad Boy from 2008 all the way up to 2021. So she says she looked at Cassie as a little sister. She knows her very well. She says she remembers that they always had to report back to Sean on whatever Cassie's look was, meaning they had to send pictures or videos, no matter what it was, just to make sure that it was the look that he wanted. At this time, she said they went to Prince's house party, and her and Cassie went back to the hotel. She said later on, Diddy storms into the room and he said, "Where the F is she?" She said that she heard a lot of moving around, a lot of screaming, and then after that, she saw Diddy leave the room. When she finally saw Cassie, in quotes, she said she had a swollen eye, busted lip, and knots on her head. Mila would then take Cassie home with her to nurse her back to health for a few days. She also had a doctor friend who came to look at Cassie and said that Cassie needed to go to the emergency room because her injuries were that severe. The injuries were to her face, stomach, and ribs. Mila said she didn't call the police because she feared for her life as well as Cassie. But after this incident, her and Cassie never spoke of this again. The defense also brought up a lot of photos and videos of different occasions where Mila did Cassie's makeup. They were trying to confirm that Cassie was booked and busy. Then you have Frederick Zimmer, who is the manager of a famous Beverly Hills hotel. His testimony was short and to the point, and here it goes. They showed the jury his hotel profile that they said never deletes itself once it's created. It was started in 2006, and it started off with the name Sean Combs. Then it changed to Jackie Star in 2009, which we know is an alias for Cassie. Then it went from Sean Combs to Jackie Star to Frank White or Frank Black, which we also know are Diddy's aliases. And then in 2019, it changed to Ryan Lopez. Is that a new alias? Y'all talk to me in the comments. Have y'all heard about Ryan Lopez? I'm not sure about that one. Each profile has specific notes. So here are some of the notes. It says, please monitor outside of this room, down the hallway to spray air freshener. Always spills candle wax on everything and uses excessive amounts of oil. Place the room out of order upon departure for deep cleaning. Please authorize an extra $1,000 when guests stay with us to cover the damages. This was, like I said, straight to the point. The defense had no cross for them. Last person on the stand of the day was Joshua Croft. Joshua Croft is a Homeland Security officer who specializes in computer forensics. He would testify that he extracted data from Cassie's laptops. He also said that one of them worked, one of them didn't, and the other one had a user profile by the name of Frank Black. His testimony was super short, like I said, and he will continue on Tuesday. We'll be back on Tuesday with more fresh information. However, I haven't forgotten about our first witness of the day. So our first witness of the day is George Kaplan, who we know is Diddy's past assistant. And here's a little bit about what he said. So he testified that he witnessed some physical violence from Diddy to Cassie. And this was on two separate occasions. Then there was one other separate occasion where he saw him actually invoke violence on another woman who wasn't Cassie, but he would categorize her as a girlfriend. So the first one was on a private jet while other people around. Cassie even said something to the effect like, is anybody going to do anything? Of course, crickets. No one did nothing. Another incident happened later on that year where he would go into Diddy's bedroom because Diddy was asking for something to get picked up from the drugstore. He said it looked like a solution that needed to be made in order to be an anti-swelling agent, and Cassie looked pretty physically beat up at that point in time. The third incident is what we're going to talk about right now, and that was an incident where he had another girlfriend, and he saw Diddy throwing either decorative or real green apples at this lady's head. He's unsure if the apples actually landed and hit her. Because of this made him actually quit this job. Here's a direct quote. The central reason I left my job as Mr. Combs' assistant was that I was not comfortable or aligned with the physical behavior that had been going on, and I had seen pieces over the course of the last few months, he said. He also said that Diddy was extremely gracious of his service once he quit, but he never told Diddy that he quit because Diddy was abusive and wild. He told Diddy that he quit because his father was sick. So he said that Diddy was kind of indebted to him, very happy for his service. And after that, he said that he continued to check on Diddy, including telling him happy birthday every single year. So he said he wanted to continue to have a relationship with him and that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity thing. He had no issues with Diddy, even though his moral compass pushed him to quit. Anyway, if you guys want more, holla at me in the comments. I have a lot that we'll unpack in the next few days. However, if you want a recap from week 1, like I said before, Please tune into the Point of No Return True Crime Podcast, Courtroom Clarity, the Diddy trial week 1. Until next time, this is the Point of No Return. I'm Amanda, and I will talk to you very soon.
Audio Jungle.